All right. Hello, everyone. This is Vanessa, short and sweet. Welcome to the second episode of sorry, of making a recipe for the lemon and blueberry scones. Now, these are really, really quick, so hopefully this becomes something that you do like every weekend. So I already put up the ingredients on the description, but just to go over, we start off with the 2.5 cups of flour. I have some granulated sugar, some salt, some baking powder. Of course, can't forget the lemon zest, the blueberries. We have vanilla extract, lemon juice, egg, very, very cold heavy cream. So I just took this out of the fridge. And then also we have very, very cold butter. Okay. And throughout the video, I do have it set. So if you guys have any questions, just put it in the comments. We will have a time for when they're in the oven to answer any questions as well. But if you have any questions during the show, let me know. All right. So right here I have the flour. I'm going to add all of the dry ingredients. So I have the sugar, then the baking powder, and then the salt. Okay. And I'm just going to give this a really, really quick whisk. And the best part about making scones is that honestly, you don't need any tools whatsoever. You can actually do this with just a fork if you don't even have a whisk. If you don't have a whisk, you probably should invest in one. But if you don't, you can always use just a fork. Okay, so just kind of get any of those lumps really out of there. After that is nicely whisked, then you take the cold butter, put that in here. All right. And as I said, you don't need any fancy tools, but because I have a pastry cutter, I am going to use a pastry cutter to really break down that butter. So that way it's about the size like of a pea. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you can definitely just use like 2 really big forks to break up that butter, and that would do the exact same thing, okay? So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get these little nuggets of butter. So that way when it's baking, you have like these really moist pockets of this like buttery goodness. So, and it's supposed to kind of look like wet sand almost. So as long as those pieces are about the size of peas for the most part, then that's really what we're looking for, okay? And sometimes it does get stuck on the pastry cutter. So you just have to make sure that you kind of push down the butter through. And you just keep breaking it up until you get the size that you need, okay? And we're almost there. I like doing it with my hands too. The only problem with that is you have to work a little bit faster. If you don't work fast enough, then you're really gonna warm up that butter. And then instead of having like these really moist pockets of buttery pieces, you're just gonna get a really melted sort of scone that's gonna be very, very dry. So if you've ever had a dry scone, it's probably because they warmed up the butter a little too much while making them. Okay. Looks like we have the consistency we want, and I'll show you a piece of butter so you can kind of see what the size of it's supposed to be. So right here, we have a little piece of butter, very, very tiny. Okay. So the next thing we're gonna do is add those, the lemon zest into here. Get all of that yummy goodness in there. Then we're also gonna put in the cup of the blueberries. And then all we're gonna do is just sort of fold that in, make sure that all of the blueberries are sort of covered with the flour, just so they're evenly distributed throughout the scone, so they don't all fall sort of to the bottom. Okay, so just give that a couple of tosses, nothing too major. Okay. And then once you're done with that, we're just gonna put it to the side. We're gonna grab our heavy cream right here. We're going to add all of our wet ingredients now. So the vanilla extract, the lemon juice to give it more of a lemony flavor that really comes through the scone. And then of course, last but not least, the 1 egg, or the 2 eggs, sorry. And then all you're gonna do again is whisk this up. I like to just do it inside the little measuring cup so I don't dirty another, bowl and less things to clean after. So give that a little bit whisk to break up that egg. Okay. Then once that's nicely whisked, you're just gonna pour it back into the dry ingredients. And then you're basically gonna mix it all together until it kind of just comes together. Nothing, it doesn't, don't over mix it, because again, if you over mix it, then you'll end up just really warming up that butter instead of keeping those really, really cold pieces of butter throughout the dough. Okay. So just give it a couple of whisks just to make sure it comes together. All right. You can already smell the lemon zest coming through. Of course, you don't smell the blueberries yet, but that lemon juice plus the lemon zest, I'm telling you, when these come out of the oven, they're gonna smell so good. You're gonna love it. Okay. Just give it a couple more tosses. Right. I'm telling you, these are really, really quick. We're almost done. We're more than halfway done. It takes a lot longer to bake than it does to actually make these. Right? So as you can see, it's still sort of in pieces. There's still a lot of moisture in there. And trust me, once we actually put it onto the counter, it'll really all come together. So don't worry if it doesn't look like a cake dough, if you've ever made that. It's not supposed to be super, super together. There are supposed to be some like dry parts of the dough, which is sort of counterintuitive because you think we're making moist scones, but trust me, by the end, you will see that these are the most moist scones you've ever had. Not like some of those bakeries where it's so dry that you need that like really big gulp of coffee to eat it with. These are not like that. All right, so we got that mixed. Now, to make things easier, I just have a little bit of flour and I like to just dust the counter just to make sure that they don't actually stick to your counter, right? Not too much. All right. And then we're just going to pour that mixture onto your counter. All right. Just trying to make sure that I don't miss any of that delicious mixture. All right. I'm just going to take it off the spatula because there's a lot of blueberries stuck on there. Also, you're going to get your hands dirty, so if you have any rings, make sure you take those off. You're going to have to clean that later. All right. Take that off here. And all you have to do now is sort of just bring it together. Again, try not to play around with it too much to not warm it up, but really just try to put it into a disc and make it come together so that way we can form our little scones. Okay? Woo. So much flour going everywhere. Okay. And as you see, the more you work with it, of course, the butter is going to start melting. So it also helps provide a little bit more moisture for it to sort of come together. So you see it's coming together. Just going to kind of make it into a mountain just to make sure all of those little flour pieces are in here because I don't want to miss anything. This only makes 8 scones, so not very many, and I eat about 2 as soon as they come out. So want to make sure that I get the biggest scones I can get. All right. So just make this, again, like I said, into a disc. Just lightly pushing across, really trying to form that disc going around. There we go. Start to see a form. And then you want it to be about 1 inch high, okay? Just so you make sure you have some really, really pretty sort of fat scones, okay? So I'm just pushing this out to get to that inch because I think mine are a little too fat right now. We're almost done. You can start feeling the butter sort of melt in your fingers. If it's really, really bad and you start seeing butter in your fingers, you need to like put your hands into cold ice water and then continue, because if not, like I said, you're gonna melt that butter. And you should be able to see those little pea-sized pieces of butter throughout the dough. That means you're doing good, okay? So we're almost there, getting to about 1 inch. All right. And the next thing that you're going to do is, if you don't have a bench scraper, again, totally fine. Most of these recipes that we're going to do together, there's other ways that I found before I got all fancy and bought all of these tools. So if you don't have a bench scraper, just use a knife. It'll be the exact same thing. Put a little flour on it just to make sure that the dough doesn't stick. I got a bench scraper, so just put a little bit of flour on it from your leftover from the bench. And we're going to cut this into 8 sections. So you're just going to go down the center, 10 it's a pizza, go all the way down to the bottom. Okay, and if it's sticky, just add a little bit more flour. Don't worry, this won't dry up the actual dough. And then you're gonna go the other way at 45 degrees and cut it down the middle again. Okay, there we go. Just put in a little bit more flour just to make sure it doesn't stick. And then you're gonna go diagonal, right? And then that will give you your 8 scones. All right, we're almost done. And the 8. Perfect. Now you can either do the brushing of the heavy cream directly on here just to do it really quickly, or you can put them onto the mat or onto your baking sheet and then brush the heavy cream on there. I like to be a little bit lazy, so I'm just gonna brush them right here and then transfer it over. So just have a little bit of extra heavy cream. It's about a table to 2 tablespoons of heavy cream that you need just to brush the top of them. And that'll help really give them that really golden brown color. And so it'll look beautiful when you take it out of the oven, okay? So just brush it lightly on there. Again, if you don't have a pastry brush, you can use a brush. If you like to barbecue, that's the same one. You just have to make sure that those little, the little fibers don't accidentally like get stuck on your scone. So just be careful with that. And if you don't have those types of brushes either, honestly, you could just kind of drizzle it on there and with your finger, just rub it in. It just has to be a really tiny layer. Nothing super fancy. This is really just to make sure that the scones are moist and that they get that really pretty brown color by the end, okay? All right. We're almost there. I hope everyone's still having a lot of fun making this and that it's coming out just as pretty as this. They're really not that hard to make, which is why sometimes I honestly just go on a scone binge. I start making lemon blueberry scones, vanilla blueberry scones, raspberry white chocolate scones, maple oat scones, really just whatever I have in the pantry. I just turn it into a scone so that way I have something delicious to eat in the morning with my morning coffee. So, and they're so easy. It's like 10, 15 minutes it takes to make these. Okay. So we're gonna get our pan. Now I have a silicone mat or a baking mat. You don't have to have one. You can either use just parchment paper, foil. If you don't even have that, that's totally fine. Just put a little bit of butter, a little bit of oil, making sure that they don't stick. Put them on there and you're totally fine. Okay. So we're just gonna pick these up one at a time. There we go. And we're gonna lay them on the mat. Okay. This is why a bench scraper actually helps sometimes, because if it sticks a little bit to your countertop, totally fine, but this just makes it a lot easier to pick it up. Okay, and you just need about 1 inch of space in between. They don't really grow too much to the sides. It really grows sort of upwards. Okay. Just get the last one up here. And I did have the oven heating at 400 degrees. So that is already set and ready to go for us. Let's get the last 2 on here. There we go. So delicate, I don't want to break one. Okay, and the last thing that we're gonna do is add some sanding sugar. Now, I did say that this was optional. It's a little hard to find if you've never bought it. Usually you can find it at your local Lucky's, Albertsons, wherever you live, just your grocery store. The only thing is sometimes they don't have the clear white color for baking goods. So usually it comes like in a pink and a blue or other birthday color sprinkles. So it's really just like this crystallized form of sugar. And it really just makes it look beautiful on top. And I'll actually go over while these are baking another option in case you could not find the sanding sugar. So I'm actually just gonna add it on top for half of them. That way we can also go over, if you don't have sanding sugar, what you can do or add on the top to make it look extra beautiful and just give it that extra like little sweet crunch that you need in the morning. Okay, so just gonna add that on 4 of these. If I can count, that's 4, perfect. Okay. And then I'm just gonna pop these into the oven for about 16 to 20 minutes, depending on your altitude or and your oven. So just until the really like the top is very, very lightly golden brown, okay? Just gonna pop these in there right now. Go. All right. And while those are cooking, as I mentioned, I am going to show you how to make a separate sort of topping in case you can't find that sanding sugar. I'm just going to clean up a little bit because it does leave a little bit of a mess whenever you're making these on the countertop. So if you do have like a really big sort of cutting board, you can always do it on there. Saves you the actual extra cleanup. But again, I'm telling you, if you want to invest in something that's going to help you with your baking, this bench scraper, it really just grabs all of that flour and makes the cleaning so much easier. Okay. All right. So the other topping that we have is actually a sort of sugar glaze or a confectioner's glaze that we can put on top. And so all you need is some powdered sugar and then some milk. Now, if you don't have milk, you can use lemon juice, which would go perfectly with these lemon blueberry scones, or you can even use vanilla extract. So that'll also give it sort of a vanilla glaze on top. I'm just going to use milk because I really like the flavor of the lemon blueberry scone to really shine through, and this is sort of like a sugary coating that you can put on top. Okay? So all you need is about a cup of confectioner sugar or powdered sugar, and then about 3 to 4 tablespoons of milk. And so with those 3 to 4 tablespoons of milk, you kind of have to eye it once you mix it after the 3 tablespoons to make sure you get that really thick consistency, because we don't want this drizzle to sort of run off your scone. We want it to be able to create like a really nice sort of ribbon over it. And I'm going to teach you a little trick with the Ziploc bag for actually drizzling that over and making it easier for it to look a lot more professionally done. So we're just going to get a really quick bowl, get a cup of that confectioner sugar in here. Right. And like I mentioned, just 3, 4 tablespoons of milk. You can even use heavy cream since we've used it in this recipe, so you don't have to get another ingredient. All you have to do is just make sure every tablespoon sort of mix it around and make sure that you're getting that really thick consistency. All right, just gonna use my whisk from earlier. I actually forgot a spoon, so let me go get a spoon. So here I have my heavy cream again from the actual scones. I'm gonna add the 3. Perfect. And the scones are really not that sweet, which is why we're adding sort of a glaze or the sanding sugar on top, just to give it that extra sweetness in here. Right, so it looks like we're gonna definitely need a little bit more milk. I usually cheat and use my little whisk, so this makes it a little harder, but we're gonna get there. I'm gonna just add a little bit more. Give that a little bit of a whisk again. And then, like I said, this is it. This is the glaze. It's really, really simple. You pour it into the bag, and then with just some scissors, you cut off the tip of the bag, and then you just literally drizzle it on there. So it makes it so much easier. You don't need to buy a pastry bag. Don't have to get all fancy with those things. I don't even think I have a pastry bag just because I use this trick. So it works a lot better. All right, so we're really, really close. We're getting almost all of that powdered sugar in here. Just gonna be a little too thick, so I'm gonna have to add some more. And like I said, if you want that extra lemon flavor, instead of milk, put some lemon juice, or if you want sort of a little in between, put some milk and lemon juice. And really, you can play around with the flavors on this glaze however you want, okay? And I will show you what the consistency is for having a good glaze. The shortest should have like a little run through that doesn't break. And if it goes way too fast, then you made it too thin, and it's easy to fix. All you have to do is add just a little bit more powdered sugar. So if you mess it up the first time, it's totally fine. Just add more sugar, it's too thick, add more milk. So try not to go too overboard and keep going back and forth, but you will get there, I promise. Okay. We are almost there, so I can show it to you guys. All right, here it goes. Moment of truth. Okay, so you see that? It's not coming down, it's still a little thick. So let me add a little bit more milk. At least I was able to show you guys what it's not supposed to do. Okay, this should be the final piece of milk. Okay, here we go. Let's do this test one more time. Okay, there we go. See that steady stream? And it's not continuing, so that means it's not too wet, still thick enough to sort of create sort of a peak. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So like I said, we just have to put that into the bag. When we're ready, cut off the corner tip and then just spoon it on there. Okay, but you do have to wait until the scones have cooled for about at least 30 minutes, just to make sure that the icing actually sticks and doesn't melt off. Okay, so while we're still waiting for the scones, we have about 10, 11 minutes left for them. I'm going to be answering any questions that you guys might have, and it could be about the scones or it could be about any other baking trick that you guys might need or tip. Okay, so let's look at the questions. So the first one I see is, if I want to change the flavor of the glaze, how much vanilla or lemon juice do I put into the glaze? So it's the same amount as the milk. So if you want to use vanilla or lemon juice, start off with 3 tablespoons for each cup of powdered sugar. And then, like I did it right now, just check the consistency. If you need to add more, just add a little bit more, but it should never be more than about 5 tablespoons. It really just depends on how much juice those lemons have, or how just watery that lemon or the vanilla extract that you're using really has. Okay. And then, can I freeze the butter to keep it from melting as I work the dough? So I did try that once, and actually freezing it was too hard. It wasn't actually becoming into like the pea size. They were just staying as really, really big cubes. So honestly, all you need to do is leave it in the fridge, cut it up for a little bit, and then put it back into the fridge until you're ready to bake these scones. And it really only needs five minutes max after you've cut it into cubes before you can use it for the actual recipe. So yeah, just freezing it makes it a little too hard. How long do the scones last after they're baked? So as long as they're at room temperature, they'll last about 3 to 4 days. Now I like to put them in a container that sort of keeps them sealed, so that way the air doesn't dry them out. They'll still be good if you don't have like a container that you can use that for, but this way they stay really nice and moist. If you want to keep them longer, I don't know if I could ever do that just because they're so delicious and there's 8 of them. You could put them in the freezer and they would last for about a week or 2, but you would have to wait until they thawed out at room temperature. But room temperature, they last about 3 to 4 days.
How long do we cook it?
Bake it for?
Bake
How
it
long do you bake it for? You bake it for about 16 to 20 minutes, okay? So put it for 16, and then once you hear the buzzer at 16, take a little peek. Don't open the oven, just turn on the light and make sure that it's nice and golden brown. If it's not, then leave it a couple extra minutes, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Another question, what's best to use and why? Foil, parchment paper, or the baking sheet lining? Honestly, my favorite is the lining just because I can reuse it. And parchment paper is a little bit more expensive, so it kind of adds up after a while. In terms of what will bake the best, parchment paper and that silicone mat are pretty much equal. The only reason I use parchment paper sometimes is because I have not washed that silicone mat because they only have one. But honestly, those 2 are the best. Foil still works. Sometimes you'll just have more of a burnt bottom to it sometimes. And then also if you use oil, I mean, you're cooking the oil in the oven, so it is going to create sort of a little burnt taste on the bottom, but it'll still be good. If you like that little sort of extra crispiness on your baked goods, go ahead and do the oil, but my preference has always been the parchment paper and the silicone mat, so that way it really stays true to the flavor of whatever you're baking. Can you make scone mixture the night before and bake the next day? Definitely. So all you have to do is that step right before we actually poured it onto the counter. You can make it up till then, put it into the fridge, again, not the freezer, put it into the fridge, make sure that the butter is still nice and cold, the heavy cream is cold. The only thing is you might want to leave it on the counter for about 5 minutes just so you can actually form that disc before cutting into it. But definitely you can always do it the night before and then just sort of put it together, cut it, and put it into the oven. Can I use frozen berries if I don't have fresh ones? That is a great question. You can use frozen blueberries. What I would do is first thaw it out and then make sure that you pat dry it a little bit with a paper towel, just because that added moisture will dry out your scone. So definitely you can use frozen ones. If you're really in a rush and you just want to throw in the frozen blueberries, wait until the step where you put in the blueberries so that way they don't release that much moisture while you're sort of making that disc. But again, you can always use frozen berries, and this is something you can do all the time. Okay. All right. Let's see if there's any other questions. I think that's all we have for now. As I mentioned, there are a couple other tips that you could do when you're making these lemon blueberry scones or any other scones. For one, this base dough that you're using, you could really use it for any other type of scone. So instead of putting the blueberries and the lemon zest, for example, you can opt out of those, put some chocolate chips and some chocolate chunks to make chocolate scones. I wouldn't use this recipe to make any savory scones. We can definitely do those later and put some basil, some delicious goat cheese. But this one, for any sweet scones, you can really use it as a base. I like adding some fresh raspberries and white chocolate chips. You just have to be a little bit more gentle with the raspberries. I like to put the raspberries towards the end after I've made the disc, so that way they don't break up and kind of mess up and sort of do like a tie-dye within your scone. But besides that, you can really do whatever you want with this base dough. Okay. And it looks like I have another question. Can I use the food processor for incorporating the butter into the flour? Yes, you can definitely do it. I would make sure that you do the pulsing option on your food processor, just so that way you don't overbeat your butter. Again, you want to make sure that it's the size of a pea, not any smaller, because then if you do that, then you won't have like those pockets of the butter when it's baking. And it's similar to croissants. You want those little butter pieces so that way it can really sort of lift the scone, and then also just make sure that the moisture is like well balanced throughout the actual dough. So you can just be very careful how many times you actually press that pulse button. And then I would mix the liquid parts still by hand with a spatula just to be safe. Again, if you really not trigger happy and like don't like to press that pulse button as much as I do, you can do it, but just be careful, keep an eye on it just to make sure it doesn't get overly moist. All right. Any other questions? Let's see. I think that's all the other questions that we've had. Besides that, the sanding sugar, as I mentioned, if you can't find it in a Lucky's, Albertsons, Safeway, not trying to stick to one, you can always try going to a Sur La Table, a Williams Sonoma, and they'll definitely have the sanding sugar. And I like to use it for my cakes that I make, besides the scones, and then you can even use them for Christmas time for your sugar cookies. So those little sugar crystals that you usually use on top of your Christmas cookies, those are actually standing sugar. They're just in red and green. So like I said, the clear one's a little bit harder to find, but not impossible. And so if you go to those culinary stores, I'm sure you'll definitely find it. And sometimes you can even get it on Amazon. You plan to make a lot of scones, get a big size, and trust me, you're going to be making these scones all the time. I mean, it takes from start to finish about 30 minutes. So it's really easy, really good. One more question. So it says, how do I store unused glaze? So that one's a little bit more difficult because if you don't use your glaze right away, it starts sort of creating this crust on top. The way I've sort of had it last for at least 2-3 days is I put a plastic film on top of it, but it has to touch the actual sugar so the oxygen doesn't really touch it and form that really thick crust. So you can do it. I wouldn't suggest it. But if you really had some leftover and you had plans to use it in 2-3 days, just make sure you get that plastic film, make sure you push it into it, and then stick it into the fridge. Okay. All right. Any other questions? I think that's it that we have for today. We only have about 2 minutes left on the scones, so they're almost done. I could smell the lemony goodness. Oh, I hear that countdown. It's already counting down from a minute, so I'm very excited. I could just smell that lemon and that blueberry. Like I said, my favorite though is still raspberry and white chocolate. So if I find some good raspberries, I'll make those on another show. Ooh, I have another one. A recipe calls for buttermilk, but I don't want to go to the store just for that. Can I make my own? Yes, you can actually. I never have buttermilk on hand just because I've learned about the trick not too long ago. If you have just milk and lemon juice or white vinegar, that's all you need, and it works exactly the same. I've made dinner biscuits for biscuits and gravy with just milk and either lemon juice and white vinegar. It works exactly the same. So I don't have the measurements right now, but I believe it was about a cup of milk with a tablespoon of either white vinegar and lemon juice. You set that on the table, wait about 15 minutes, and then you'll start to see it sort of curdle. It looks kind of gross, but trust me, it's good. And then you just use that into your scone mixture or for whatever else you're using your buttermilk. And there you go, voila. Don't need to keep it in your fridge. Now I hear the oven, so I'm gonna go check it out really quick. So I'll show you the delicious goodness. So as you can see, they're not supposed to get like really, really dark brown. The corners you can see are getting a light pale brown. That's when you know it's done, okay? We're just gonna leave this on top of the stove to cool down. All right. And then, like I said, you just have to leave it for about 30 to 45 minutes. Once you touch it, if it's nice and room temperature, then you can actually put the glaze on and then let it set for about 10-15 minutes, and then you can enjoy your scones. But me, I don't have any patience, so that's why I always go with the sanding sugar, so I can wait 5 minutes for it not to be hot enough to, burn me. And then I just eat my scone with a nice glass of milk or a delicious cup of coffee. I don't think I have any other questions, but if you have any other comments, something that pops into your head, leave them in the comment box and I'll make sure to answer them later. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.